It's a pleasure to welcome on dais a special invitee, Rajender Singh, founder member of IUDI. He's an architect who specializes in city planning, urban design, transit-oriented development, and urban regeneration. He will share a presentation on city and transit-oriented development. Please join in welcoming him.
Good morning to everyone, and very enlightening presentations on procurement and also on affordable housing. I think a very important and very sensitive subject that I think we need to deal with affordable housing, and I think the right connection made by Mr. Anil on TOD and affordable housing. So I'm going to be speaking about how transit-oriented development in the city are connected, and it's not going to be very comprehensive, but I'll flag certain issues which are important with respect to the way transit-oriented development can actually make our cities better. To begin with, since I'm a member of Indian Institute of Urban Designers, I'm one of the founder member. We started this institute in 2006 with a few members from Delhi and with some other states. And now we have a fairly large number of membership. Primarily, we deal with both urban design studies as well as practice. We want to further the cause of urban design with respect to both these avenues. We have around 700 members within the country, and some members are outside the country also. And in case there is anybody who's an urban designer not yet joined the IUDI, please join the IUDI. And also primarily we are concerned about how we can actually make our cities better, more livable, and their experiential qualities actually improve. We believe in actually promoting design excellence. That is an important part of it. Like the way you design interiors of any building or any space. Similarly, I think we also need to design cities in a similar fashion. There a lot of detailing needs to be done also. IUDI generally engages in lecture series to promote the cause of urban design. We also encourage seminars which are based on students' work, especially thesis, and also knowledge exchange with respect to on urban design. Sometimes we have invited outside the people are coming from outside the country as well. And usually we have one national conference taking place organized by IUDI. So we have an upcoming conference in Kolkata in case anybody is interested in cities, and the theme of this conference in Kolkata will be on cities in transition, and it will be on 7th and 8th of March. So you can actually visit IUDI website and please join in Kolkata. So we have very interesting speakers in this workshop on the subject of city and urban design. Coming back to transit-oriented development, I think we had a very interesting talk by Mr. Ramanna, and I had a little conversation with Mr. Ramanna before the conference actually started. Now, Mumbai is inspiring for 300 kilometers of metro network in addition to suburban network that already has. Delhi has, I think, one of the largest network in the country with respect to metro. And many cities, I think metropolitan cities, are now beginning to invest in metro networks. And it's important that we have high capacity public transit systems. It's not necessarily rail-based public transit is important, but bus-based public transit is also important, keeping in mind the kind of a cost involved in promoting the rail-based public transit. There are a number of states in the country now, they have a transit-oriented policy. And though these policies are very recent phenomena, it's just started around, say, a decade back. Many of the policies are very fresh, they just started out, they just been launched 2 years back or so. In principle, these policies aim at we shift from private mode of transport to public transit, which can be bus-based as well as rail-based and other form of paratransit as well, and walk. I think walk has been very seriously ignored in our cities, and cycle to our work or other social engagement places. So this is an important places, and this has to be done in an integrated manner. One of the problem happens in cities is that we work simultaneously but in a parallel manner, and we don't integrate our networks, especially transportation networks of the city. The other thing is to look at through the planning process of integrating the public transit, land use, as well as public spaces. I think urban design is one of the discipline responsible for improving public space environment in our cities. And also look at the idea of compact city. I think it's important that we talk about compact cities, especially with respect to public transit. Very often when we work on various cities all across the country, we are kind of mindlessly expanding urban areas. Thousands of square kilometers, it's not necessary. We do not need that much of space. When you have a very large spread, you cannot support it by public transit. So in other words, there are some fundamental contradictions that we have in our city which need to be dealt with. So just to highlight some of the TOD policies, I think we have a national transit-oriented development policy launched in 2017. It's a very comprehensive TOD policy. It acts as a kind of a guidelines for many states also which use this footprint to structure their own TOD policy. As we know that urban development is actually a state subject, so each state is supposed to have its own transit-oriented development policy. So there are many states which has this policy now, but they differ a little bit from one another. Fundamentally, they are trying to encourage use of public transit and creating a better city in the immediate influence area of the public transit stations. One of the aspect I think which is very critical to looking at transit-oriented development is, and all policies talk about, is to defining a influence area with respect to stations. And often most policy talk about 500 to 800 meter of influence area, which is actually a walkable, or you can use that distance by having a paratransit system that is connected to the main transportation node or public transit stations. The other thing policy talks about is that development authorities are supposed to actually delineate these influence areas. So thereafter the plans can actually be prepared for the transit-oriented development for these influence areas. And also just to highlight a case of Delhi, that Delhi has a TOD policy which actually talks about creating an influence zone plans. So they have an influence zone planning area for which they prepare influence zone plans. This process is just about started in Delhi. There are not many projects that are implemented, but we are hoping that in coming time there will be many transit-oriented development implemented on ground with respect to that. We are currently working with DDA on Dwarka. Dwarka is one of the sub-city in Delhi, where the first job is to take the policy, define what is the influence area. And there are a number of stations. They treat these influence area with respect to the stations as a single influence area. For that matter, we are dealing with 8 stations. So 8 stations are turned into a single influence area. And that's where we need to look at transit-oriented development. And Delhi talks about 500 meter and 800 meter transit influence area, where 500 meters is supposed to have an intense development where you can take a benefit of higher FSI, which is allowed as per the TOD policy, because master plan allows you around 2.5 to 3, but TOD policy allows you further densification. So, and the remaining TOD influence area up to 800 meter in DDA or in Delhi actually is only meant for infrastructure planning, not for FAR intensification based development. So in other words, we bring more people closer to the transit station, hence the ridership also goes up. I think it's an important phenomenon that we integrate systems and enhance or increase the use of the public transit. So in other words, transit-oriented development is very central how our public transits can actually be utilized. They're very expensive. The amount of money, I think I was just looking at the numbers, what Mr. Ramana shared in the morning, 33 kilometers, roughly around 37,000 crores. That means we are spending 1,000 per kilometer. So if you don't use it, it's a waste of money. So it's a very important phenomenon that we take series of steps in order to promote transit-oriented development. Just to highlight one of the aspects transit-oriented development actually takes into account is to promote mixed land use. And just to take up an example of Uttar Pradesh as a transit-oriented development policy, in which they actually encourage mixed use. Very often the land use is defined through the master plan as zonal plan. The TOD policy actually allows you, based on the master plan land uses, to bring variation or variety in terms of mixed land uses. So here the TOD policy of Uttar Pradesh talks about 30% of the land use can be actually allocated for some other functions for plots which are less than 1 hectare. But plots which are more than 1 hectare actually could have a greater flexibility. Say 50% of the land use can actually go for other land uses. So in other words, mixed land use is important. So in other words, we have a kind of work-live environment when we talk about transit-oriented development. So the policies actually try to overcome the rigidity that master plans and zonal plans that are actually promoted through these legal documents that are there in on our cities. Now, very often when we talk about transit-oriented development to many development authority, very often they understand we will get more FAR, a floor area ratio to build on, or floor space to build on. But actually transit-oriented development talks about many dimensions. It talks about multimodal integration, it talks about first and last mile connectivity, it talks about having a interconnected street networks, it talks about NLT, which is actually walkable infrastructure or walking infrastructure, and bicycle network. It talks about traffic calming. It talks about optimizing densities. It's not necessary that if you are given 4.5 or 5 FSI under transit-oriented development, you must consume 100%. Sometimes you don't have a demand for it, but idea is to focus on many other dimensions of the transit-oriented development. Managing parking is a serious issue, I think, in our cities, because we are our public space or streets are littered by parking. So in other words, having a parking space organized with respect to transit-oriented development is very important. Informal sector is very integral part of our economy. It needs to be integrated when we talk about transit-oriented development. Very often, I think we don't give enough attention to look at it. Informal sector, which are very important part of our, I think, livelihood in the countries. And I think Anil talked about affordable housing. It's very important. I heard about that New Mumbai actually promotes affordable housing close to the metro station. It's a good idea. I think the people who are on the margin should be given the first priority with respect to transit-oriented development. And the idea of the complete streets which are designed for everybody in an equitable manner, that is an important aspect. So in other words, I think transit-oriented development is a design subject, needs to be integrating many disciplines together and having a better cities around the station or better urban development or built environment around the stations. One other thing which I wanted to mention is not many cities have adequate or enough amount of public transit. Actually, if you look at only Delhi and Mumbai come close to 50%, above 50% in terms of share of public transit. A lot of our metropolitan cities or state capitals do not have adequate public transit. They are like 20% or 25%. In fact, we were doing a study on Kolkata and Chennai metropolitan area as a part of the spatial planning and visioning exercise. We actually looked at the data, the share of bus-based public transit is actually going down. That's because cities are spending mindlessly and there is no integration between various transport methods or transport systems. So at the same time, just to give an idea about Delhi now has a fairly good network of metro. It's become very popular. But unfortunately, there's not enough integration between various modes. There are a number of organizations, DMRC, DDA, and CPWD and so on. So they do not really work together to integrate things together. So as a result, in Delhi, I think Mr. Ramana was also sharing that bus-based public transit share has gone down. That's because there is no interconnectivity between them. And whereas the two-wheeler, I think Mr. Ramana also talked about, two-wheeler actually numbers are going up very high. They are growing at a very alarming rate in the city. And roads are designed for cars. They are not designed for two-wheelers. They are not designed for pedestrians. They are not designed for, say, cyclists and all that. So in other words, there are issues of safety, congestion, and efficiency in the end. So these are serious concerns where one needs to be looking at, and transit-oriented development is a way forward to looking at. Now, some of these images are from Delhi. We have a good metro network, but I think there are still concerns about, for that matter, New Delhi railway station is connected by public transit, but it's still chaotic. The parking is not dealt with. When people arrive to the station, they don't know where to actually arrive and walk into the station building. They are very chaotic in nature. And other thing is that in NCR, the National Capital Region, DMRC is actually doing gated station designs. They are not concerned about what happens outside. Local bodies don't actually coordinate with them. So in other words, moment you come out of the gated complex of a metro station, you find this total chaos. Also, I think Delhi has too many cars, too many vehicles. I think more than a crore actually. In just 1400 square kilometer, we have too many cars, too many two-wheelers. And these are very recent pictures, what you see this crowded road. In the morning and evening hours, you can see that there are congestions and leading to a lot of increase in travel time. Air pollution has become a serious concern. Among the carbon emission and other pollutants that are coming out of these private vehicles are very, not to talk about the dust pollution that happens because of the transportation. That is an added problem. This is not accounted for. And also, I think the public quality is constantly eroding. Even the study what we did on Kolkata, what you see this bottom left picture is actually from Kolkata. Kolkata, again, just to reiterate, its public transit share is actually going. We were working on climate change and its impact on Kolkata metropolitan area, and transportation is a serious concern as part of the climate change aspect we're looking into. So in other words, I think Kolkata, you look at the roads in Kolkata, it's not about one particular road, I think all over. Especially in the Kolkata Municipal Corporation area, the streets are chaotic. There's no movement space actually, very large pedestrian area. So these streets are not designed actually what they can actually be efficiently used for. And hence it becomes a serious concern with respect to safety, and very often people run for their lives, especially old people, children wanting to cross roads have a serious concern. We are still building highways, expressways, we are still building flyovers. Delhi started building flyovers in 1983. We see them as a solution, but we find traffic jam on the flyovers or speeding from the flyovers and ending up in a traffic jam. So in other words, I think a lot of political priorities are not necessarily a solution for city in terms of the quality of life or efficient mobility in the city. Just to talk about some examples, I think we need to catch up with many cities across the world to talk about Singapore. Singapore actually, if you travel there, you find that various modes are very well integrated. You can actually go to a station and you will find a very good quality information, how you can actually catch a taxi, how you can change from one mode to another mode. And also they have both at a surface level as well as subterranean level, how stations are connected. And they have created a whole lot of activity network with respect to that. And in fact, they are looking at their future plan, 2030, around transit-oriented development and not invading into their green area, because for Singapore, that island situation is a very learning situation. I think whole rest of the world should learn from them that our city should not be mindlessly expanded, but imagine them to be islands within a natural environment and make them more compacted. So they are talking about brownfield redevelopment using leveraging transit-oriented development and public transit, and that is actually okay, right? So they have a strong agenda by 2030. They are going to be actually pushing from 63 to 65%. They are currently around 65% in terms of share of public transit to 70%, and using and meeting many of the climate agenda. I think many of the countries and cities are signatories to the climate change, and we all want to be carbon neutral by 2070, but many countries and cities have an agenda to achieve that much before that. And their bus-based public transit share is very high, MRT and next taxi. So all these are forms of various public transit modes, and they are well integrated in Singapore. Also to talk about transit-oriented development, how through transit-oriented development we can actually do a lot of good actually. We can do a lot of good social infrastructure development. This example from Kuala Lumpur, as you know that Kuala Lumpur city went under complete redevelopment by leveraging public transit and became one of the business hub in the world. And what they did actually while the Petronas Tower complex was being developed, city authorities asked them, the developers of Petrona complex and KLCC, that you have to actually develop a park as a good for the city. So 35-acre park, they have to develop for children as a part of the social responsibility. So I think we need to look at how private investment can also do a lot of social good. We've been working on a number of projects. I talked about Dwarka. We have been also working with the regional rapid transit system in Delhi. We're working on merit on transit-oriented development. And we recently conceptualized a corridor in Trivandrum, just from the periphery of the city, with the bus-based public transit, which is a new economic activities-based public transit corridor, because Kerala has a very serious problem of economy. So transit-oriented development should deal with all aspects of development. And we conceptualized first 500 meter as an intense development area, followed by another 1 kilometer, which could be actually promoted by supported bus-based paratransit systems connected with the major BRT system or electric-based bus system. Another aspect which I want to talk about, if we really want to have a better cities, because very often our development control regulations which are attached to the master plan, they are not adequate enough to create a better city or a quality city. So form-based code actually helps you to create a better streets, better public spaces, better interface between the street and building in terms of activity location, and also in terms of how ground coverage and other things can be dealt. Very often the current DCRs only talks about FAR and setbacks and so and so. So in other words, form-based codes need to be very much integral part of the development regulations, and National Institute of Urban Affairs has a very detailed actually guidebook, helps you to look at form-based codes, and I hope that many cities will actually push this agenda as a part of the development codes to be included, to include form-based code in the development controls. Chandni Chowk, famous example, I think brownfields in terms of transit-oriented development in Delhi is to pedestrianize areas. So that's what something we can do. One of the focus of transit-oriented development could be actually achieving pedestrianization. So over a lot of effort in Chandni Chowk, they've been able to achieve pedestrianization. But unfortunately, a lot of this pedestrianization have been sanitized. Chandni Chowk is one of the historical area, but it's been PWD style. So this is something which we need to be careful about while working on transit-oriented development. Design sensitivities has to be part of the process. I'm being asked about, I'm just concluding in 2 minutes. Other thing which I will talk about is we have master plans and zonal plans, the way we regulate our cities or plan our cities. I find land use based master plan is very rigid. Even the TOD policy, which leverages the land use and try to turn into a mixed use, actually has a limitations. So in other words, we need to learn from many other cities where they don't actually have a land use, they talk about a white land use and leave it to the market. So in other words, I think transit-oriented development should be more left as a mixed use and allowed based on the market. We are actually facing a problem in Dwarka where the land use actually does not allow a lot of market viability activities. So in other words, there is a direct conflict. So in other words, that needs to be, this method of looking at a land use-based planning in cities need to be changed and perhaps make transit-oriented development-led master plans. That's important. Just to summarize, I think future need to be looking at transit-oriented development-based master planning rather than, in other words, we have a compacted city rather than mindlessly expanding our urban areas. Very often authorities do not know what is transit-oriented development. A lot of people who manage our cities travel abroad on transit-oriented development costs, but when they come back, they ask you what is transit-oriented development. If the urban administrator does not know transit-oriented development, you have a block there. The form-based code need to be part of the development codes. The DCRs as a controlling document, and pedestrianization in brownfield areas to transform our core cities is important area which we need to look at through transit-oriented development. We have a mission here, IUDI, which can actually be acting as a pressure group to promote transit-oriented development in our cities, irrespective of their size. Thank you very much.